It was a quiet night, and the wind outside was soft but cold. The moon was hiding behind dark clouds, and the street was empty. Inside a small wooden house near the forest, a man named Jake was sitting on his old couch with a cup of coffee in his hand. He was tired after a long day of work, and his eyes were half closed. The sound of rain tapping on the window was calm and steady. Everything was peaceful until there was a knock at the door. Jake looked up slowly and frowned. He was not expecting anyone at this time. He placed the coffee cup on the table and stood up. The knock came again, but softer this time. It was strange. Jake walked to the door and opened it slowly. There was no one, only the rain and the empty road. He stepped outside and looked left and right. Still no one, just the wind and the sound of trees moving in the distance. Jake shook his head and turned to go back inside. But then he heard a voice. It was small and trembling, a child's voice, but not normal. He turned around quickly and saw something standing near his sofa. A boy, but not an ordinary boy. His skin was pale blue, and his eyes were large and glowing softly. He had no hair and no shoes. He was wearing something that looked like a silver jumpsuit. Jake stared in shock and confusion. "Who are you?" Jake asked, but his voice was calm, not angry. He had seen many strange things during his time in the army, but never this. The boy raised his hand slowly, not to attack, but to show peace. "Please," the boy said, "please. Don't hurt me. I am not here to cause trouble. I just need help. My mom has been taken. She is a prisoner. She is a slave now." Jake did not move. He looked at the boy and listened. "Where are you from?" Jake asked after a moment. The boy looked at the window, then back at Jake. "I am not from Earth," the boy said. "I came from far away, from a planet you do not know. I escaped from them. They are called the Harvesters. They take people from small planets and sell them. My mom was taken because she tried to protect me. Now she is a slave somewhere in space." Jake walked slowly to the boy and sat down on the other couch. He wanted to believe this was a dream, but the fear in the boy's eyes was real. "How did you come here?" Jake asked. The boy took a deep breath. "Was inside a prison ship. They had many like me, but I am different. I can use my mind to move things. They were afraid of me, so they locked me alone. But one day I broke the door using my power. I ran. I took a small escape pod and saw this planet. I heard stories about humans. Some say you are kind, some say you are not. But I had no other choice." Jake was silent. His mind was full of questions, but he could feel the pain in the boy's voice. He was just a child looking for his mother. The boy raised his hand again. A glass of water from the table floated in the air and came to his hand. Jake watched in silence. "I did not come to fight," the boy said. "I came to find someone brave, someone not afraid, someone like you." "Why me?" Jake asked. "I am just a man living alone in a small house. I do not even have a car." The boy looked into Jake's eyes. "Because you are not afraid," he said. "You looked at me and you did not scream. You listened. You are different." The room became quiet again. Only the sound of rain filled the air. Jake stood up and walked to the window. He looked outside into the night. Then the boy said something that made Jake's heart stop. "They are coming. They followed me. They know I am here." Jake turned around quickly. "What do you mean? Who is coming?" The boy walked to the window and pointed at the sky up there. "Somewhere in the clouds they are looking. They will find me, and if they find me, they will destroy everything." Jake's face became serious. He looked at the boy, and then at the door. His old instinct started to return. The calm life was over. Something big was coming, and it all started with a strange knock at midnight. The signal in the sky. Jake did not sleep that night. His eyes stayed open while the alien boy rested on the couch. The storm outside had passed, but the fear inside him was only rising. He looked at the sky through the window. He saw nothing but clouds and stars, but his gut was warning him something was wrong. Something was coming. The boy's name was Liar. He had told Jake before falling asleep. Liar was young, maybe 10 or 11 in human years, but his eyes carried the pain of many lifetimes. Jake watched him breathe slowly. His silver suit had small glowing lines that moved like rivers of light. His fingers twitched now and then, like he was dreaming of another world. Jake stood up and walked outside. The night air was sharp and cold. He looked at the stars again and whispered to himself, "Why me? Why here? Why now behind the house there?" Was an old barn. Jake had not used it in years. He walked toward it slowly, opened the wooden door, and stepped inside. Dust covered everything. His tools were still there, and his father's old hunting rifle hung on the wall. He touched the rifle and closed his eyes. Memories came rushing back. His time in war, his friends, his losses. He had left that life behind, but it was now calling him again. Suddenly a soft hum filled the air, low at first, but growing louder. Jake looked up. The sky was glowing. Faint blue, not like lightning. Something different. A wide circular pattern appeared in the clouds like ripples in water. Then a beam of blue light shot down into the woods near his house. It vanished in seconds, but the ground shook slightly. Jake ran back to the house and locked the door. Liar was already awake. He sat on the couch with wide eyes staring at the window. "They found me," he whispered. "The trackers." "What are trackers?" Jake asked while checking the locks. Lear stood up and walked to the center of the room. "They are machines, not alive, not dead. They smell energy. They feel fear. They do not talk. They do not stop. If one is here, more will come. If they take me back, I will never see my mother again." Jake looked around the room. His phone had no signal. The lights were flickering. He picked up a flashlight and handed one to Lear. "Cannot stay here." Jake said, "We need to move." "But where?" Lear asked. "I cannot fly again. My pod is gone." Jake thought for a moment. "There's an old bunker in the hills 30 minutes from here. I built it with a friend after the war. Nobody knows about it. We can hide there." Lear nodded. He trusted Jake now, more than he trusted most beings in his life. They stepped out into the dark night. The wind had picked up again. Trees danced wildly, and the sky kept flashing that strange blue light. Jake held the rifle in one hand and the flashlight in the other. Lear walked beside him quietly, but his glowing eyes watched everything as they entered the woods. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The usual sounds were gone. No owls, no insects, only silence. Then they heard it, a metal click. Not close, not far, but near enough. Jake raised his rifle and looked around. Liar grabbed his arm and pointed up. A black shape was floating between the trees. It had long arms like blades and no face. Its body looked like liquid metal, and its movements made no sound. It had no eyes, but it turned toward them as if it could see. "Run," Jake whispered, and they both ran into the woods. Branches scratched their faces and arms, but they kept moving. Jake knew the path even in the dark. The bunker was hidden behind an old waterfall. It was not far now. The tracker moved fast, faster than it should. It glided through the trees like smoke, but it never touched the ground. Lear suddenly tripped and fell. Jake stopped and pulled him up. The tracker was behind them, almost reaching. Lear closed his eyes and held Jake's hand. Then the air around them changed. A wave of invisible energy pushed outward. The trees bent, the earth shook, and the tracker was thrown back into the dark. "What was that?" Jake asked, breathing hard. Lear looked weak, his voice shaking. "I used my mind, but it is not strong enough. Next time it will not work." Jake picked him up and kept running. At last they reached the waterfall. Behind the cold water, there was a hidden door made of thick steel. Jake opened it using an old code, and they stepped inside. The lights turned on. The air was dry and Lear collapsed on the floor. Jake locked the door behind them. For now they were safe, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. The sky had changed. The trackers had arrived, and somewhere in the galaxy, a mother waited in chains. Whispers from the dark. The bunker was cold and silent. Its walls were made of thick steel and old memories. Jake sat near the small light fixed on the ceiling, watching Lear sleep on the floor, wrapped in an army blanket. The boy looked peaceful now, but Jake knew it was only for a moment. Danger still waited outside in the woods. Maybe more than one tracker was already searching for them. Jake stood up and walked deeper into the bunker. He passed the narrow hallway and entered a hidden room. Inside were weapon supplies and an old radio system. He had not used it in years. He turned it on and waited. The screen blinked, but there was no sound. He turned the dials slowly, searching for any signal. After a few seconds, the radio picked up something static, then a sharp whisper, then silence again. Jake leaned closer. He heard the whisper once more. Not English, not any language he knew, but the voice was real. It was repeating something. A pattern made the message. He turned the dial back and recorded the sound on his old recorder. Maybe Liar could understand. I'd walked back to the main room. Liar was awake and sitting against the wall. His face looked pale, and his eyes dim. He was weaker than before. Jake handed him water, and the small recorder. Liar pressed the button and listened. His eyes widened. "This is their voice," he said softly. "They are speaking to each other. They know we are in this system. They are not just searching, they are watching." Jake looked at the walls as if he could see through them. "How many are there?" he asked. Liar closed his eyes. "I cannot tell, but I can feel them. At least 4, maybe more. One of them is different, stronger." A hunter. Jake sat down next to him. His hand rested on the rifle. He knew what a hunter meant. A being that does not stop, a being that enjoys the chase. "We cannot stay here forever," Jake said. "They will find this place. Even steel will not stop them." Lior nodded, his voice low. "Then we must move before the sun rises." Jake stood up and started packing supplies. A flashlight, batteries, food. A small map. "Where do we go?" he asked. Lior walked to the table and pointed at the sky drawn on the map. "There's a place near your mountain, a cave under the ground, older than this world. My people used it long ago, before Earth was known. There's something inside it. A door to where." Jake Lior looked at him. "To the stars." Jake did not understand fully, but he trusted the boy. If there was a way to reach the stars, then maybe there was a way to reach Liar's mother. They left the bunker just before dawn. The woods were quiet again, but the air felt heavier. Every step made the ground feel less safe. The cave was not close. They had to cross a river and climb a narrow path behind the cliffs. Lior walked slower. Now his power was fading. Jake carried him part of the way. He did not complain. He knew time was running out. As they reached the river, a shadow moved above the trees. Jake stopped and held his breath. It was not a bird. It was not a drone. It was the hunter. The shadow dropped fast like thunder. Jake pulled Liar behind a rock. They waited. No sound. No movement. Then a voice echoed through the trees, low and sharp. It spoke the same words Jake had heard. On the radio. Lior trembled. He whispered, "That is him. The one who hunts. He knows my name." Jake looked at the rifle in his hand. It felt small now, but it was all he had. The hunter stepped into view, tall and black like melted armor. Its face was smooth and empty, but its presence was loud. It held no weapon. It was the weapon. Jake raised his rifle and aimed. Lior stood beside him, weak but ready. The hunter did not attack. It watched them for a moment. Then it raised its hand, and the trees around them shook. Jake fired once. The shot hit the hunter's arm, but it did not bleed. It did not fall. It only turned and vanished into the trees like smoke. Jake grabbed Lior and ran. The cave was near. They could see the rocks opening in the side of the cliff. Entered the cave just as the sun touched the sky. Inside, the air was different, warm, stillier. Touched the wall, and the cave lit up with blue lines. Symbols moved like liquid. The door he spoke of was real. It was ancient and waiting. Jake placed his hand on it. It felt alive behind them. The hunter screamed through the forest. The sound was not just loud. It was filled with hunger. Inside the cave they were safe for now, but the door was not just a door. It was a choice. Path, and once opened, there was no going back. The door between worlds. The cave was silent like a sleeping giant. Blue lights moved across the stone like waves in water. Lior stood in front of the glowing wall with his hand still pressed against it. His eyes were wide but calm. Jake stood behind him, holding the rifle tightly, watching the entrance in case the hunter returned. The symbols on the wall changed with every breath Lior took. They were alive, not just writing. There was something more, a map, a memory, a key. Lior turned to Jake slowly. His voice was soft but steady. "This is a gate made by my ancestors long before Earth was born. It connects to the star roads, hidden tunnels across galaxies. No ship needed, just power, just will." Jake stepped closer and touched the wall. It felt like touching warm water, soft and endless. He looked at Lior. "Can it take us to your mother?" Lior closed his eyes. "If we know where she is." Yes, but I need something of hers. A trace, a link, anything that holds her energy. Jake frowned. But we have nothing. You came here. Alan Illier nodded. Yes, but I left one thing behind in my pod. Her voice crystal. It holds her last message to me. I hid it in the crash site. Jake stepped back. Then we go get it. You stay here, keep the gate. Alavilier shook his head. No, I must come with you. Only I can find the crystal. It is bonded to me. If I am not near it, it will hide itself. Jake wanted to argue. He looked at Liar's tired face, but he also saw the fire in his eyes. He gave a short nod. Then let's move before the hunter returns. They left the cave quickly. The forest outside was quiet, but not in peace. More like holding its breath again. Lear led the way. His steps slow but sure. Jake followed close behind, scanning the trees and sky, the rifle ready in his hands. After 30 minutes they reached a clearing. Burnt trees and black soil marked the crash site. Liar's pod was half buried in the earth. Smoke still rose from its broken engine. Jake moved first, checking the area. No sound, no movement. He waved to Liar, who stepped forward and touched the pod. The metal shifted and opened like a flower. Inside was a seat filled with wires and lights. Lear reached into a hidden compartment near the core and pulled out a small glowing crystal. Her voice lives. Here, he said quietly. She told me to run, to live now. This will help us find her. Jake felt a strange warmth coming from the crystal. It hummed gently in his hand when Liar passed it to him. The bond was real, but before they could turn, the trees behind them burst open. The hunter had returned. It moved faster than before, its body darker, its limbs longer. Jake fired 3 shots. The bullets passed through its body like wind. No effect. Lear raised his hand and sent a pulse of blue light toward the hunter. It slowed the creature, but only for seconds. Run! Jake shouted back to the cave. They ran through the forest. Branches tore at their skin. The hunter followed without touching the ground. Jake pushed Liar forward as they reached the cliff. The cave entrance waited behind the waterfall, but the hunter was only steps behind. Lear turned and faced the creature. His hand held the crystal tightly. He whispered something in his own language. The hunter stopped just for a breath. Its body flickered. Jake grabbed Lear and pulled him through the water into the cave. The door was still glowing, the symbols moving faster now. Lear held the crystal up and placed it in the center of the gate. The light changed from blue to golden. He looked at Jake. I can see her. Now she is in the slave station near the dying sun, a place called Draxos. The gate can take us there, but we must go together. Jake did not speak. He nodded and stepped beside the boy. The gate opened, not like a door, more like a tear in the air. On the other side was not space, not sky, but another world entirely. Red clouds, floating machines, a prison city. Jake felt his heart race. Lear took his hand. One step is enough, Lear said. Just one. Behind them, the hunter screamed again. It had found the entrance. Jake looked at the boy, then at the gate. He stepped forward. Together they crossed into the unknown, leaving Earth behind, but taking hope with them. City of Chains. Jake could not breathe at first. The air in this new place was heavy, like smoke and metal. He looked around and saw a sky that was not blue but red and orange, with black clouds drifting slowly like ash. The ground was cracked and dry, with glowing lines running through it like veins of fire. Machines flew above them in silence, watching everything below like vultures. Beside him, Liar stood still with his hand gripping the crystal tightly. His eyes were focused but filled with pain. This is Draxos, he whispered. The city where they keep the lost. Where my mother was taken. Jake scanned the area. They were standing at the edge of a giant platform made of stone and steel. Below them was the city. It stretched for miles in every direction. Towers made of dark metal rose high into the red sky. Bridges connected the towers like spiderwebs everywhere. He looked. He saw people moving slowly in lines, heads down, hands chained. They walked toward a tunnel that led into the heart of the city. As they moved, shadows followed them from the walls. Eyes without faces, voices without mouths. Jake kept his rifle close, but something told him bullets would not help here. The tunnel opened into a wide street filled with strange lights. Creatures of many shapes walked past them, some tall with silver skin, some short with long arms and large eyes. None of them spoke, none of them smiled. They all looked broken. Lear pointed to a large tower in the distance. That is the core, the prison heart. They keep the important captives there. My mother is inside. Jake nodded and followed him through the crowd. No one stopped them, but every few steps a drone flew overhead, scanning the ground with beams of light. Jake pulled up his hood. Liar covered his face with a scarf from his suit. They moved like ghosts between the lost as they reached the base of the prison tower. A group of guards appeared, tall creatures with armor fused to their bodies. Their eyes glowed white and their weapons pulsed with energy. Lear grabbed Jake's hand and whispered, "Let me speak. Let me try." He stepped forward and raised the crystal high. The light inside it pulsed once. Then again the guards stopped. They looked at each other. Then one of them stepped back and opened the gate. Jake was shocked. "How did you do that?" Lear looked at him. "This crystal carries my blood, my name. They think I am one of them, a lost prince, maybe, or something worse." They entered the tower. Inside it was dark and cold. Walls were covered in black vines that pulsed with light. Voices whispered from behind the walls like echoes of old souls. Leo walked ahead. He could feel her now. She was close, very close. They reached a large chamber filled with glowing cells. Each cell held one being, some asleep, some awake. All silent. Lear stopped at the last cell on the left. Inside was a woman with the same pale blue skin and glowing eyes. Her hair was silver, and her hands were bruised. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at Liar. She did not speak. She only placed her hand on the glass. Liar placed his hand on the same spot. A blue light passed between them. Jake watched in silence. Then the chamber shook. An alarm began to sound, loud and sharp like metal screaming. The guards had realized the truth. Liar was not one of them. He was the escaped child, the one they had lost. The cell door locked tighter. Lights turned red. Jake raised his rifle and shot the panel beside the cell. Sparks flew. The door clicked open. Lear ran to his mother and held her tightly. She whispered something in his ear. Jake turned to the hall. Guards were coming. 2 men. Lear stepped back. He touched the floor, and the crystal glowed bright. The walls of the prison shook again. Symbols appeared on the ground. Jake helped the woman stand. She was weak but alive. "We cannot go back the same way," Liar said. "They will block the gate. But there is another way, a hidden path through the under tunnels." Old and forgotten. Jake nodded. Lead. They moved through a side door and entered a narrow tunnel filled with steam and dust. The sounds of the city faded behind them. Lior held his mother's hand as they moved. Jake followed close, protecting both. Tunnel twisted and turned like a maze, but Liar knew where to go. He could feel the path. He could feel the light. At the end behind them, the sound of machines grew louder. The hunter had followed. Even here in this world, they reached a large chamber deep underground. In the center was a strange machine half buried in the earth. A gate older than the first. Lear placed the crystal into the machine. The air changed again. A new gate began to open, but before they could step through, a scream echoed behind them. The hunter stepped out of the shadows. Jake raised his rifle. Lear raised his hand. This time they would not run. They would fight together. The final stand. The hunter stepped into the chamber like a shadow made of metal and anger. Its body shimmered like black glass, and its limbs moved without sound. Its face was smooth with no eyes and no mouth, but Jake could feel its hatred like fire in the air. Lear stood in front of his mother, one hand glowing with energy, the other holding the crystal tightly. Jake moved beside him, the rifle raised, but he knew bullets were not enough. Not here, not now. The second gate behind them was almost ready. Blue light spinning in circles around the machine, like a storm waiting to open, but time was not on their side. Hunter raised one arm, and the ground cracked beneath their feet. Walls shook, and pieces of stone fell from the ceiling like rain. Lear looked at Jake, his voice steady, but his eyes full of fear. "We cannot let it stop us. We must go through the gate. If we fail, it will find others. It will never stop." Jake nodded and stepped forward slowly toward the hunter. He remembered battlefields and broken cities. He remembered friends who stood with him, even when hope was gone. Now he would do the same. He shouted at the creature, "Come and face me. Come and see what fear looks like." The hunter charged like a wave of darkness. Jake rolled to the side and fired. A bullet passed through the creature, but it staggered just a little, enough to slow it for one breath. Lear closed his eyes and focused. The crystal in his hand pulsed with light, and the gate behind them grew stronger. A wind rose from the machine, warm and full of energy. His mother touched the ground with her palm. Though weak, her power flowed like water into the floor. She was joining her son, lending him the last of her strength. The hunter turned to attack her. Jake ran in front and blocked the path. He swung his rifle like a club and struck the creature's arm. It did not break, but it cracked. The creature screamed, not with sound, but with pressure. The air became thick and hard to breathe. Lear stepped forward and lifted the crystal high above his head. The chamber lit up with blue fire. The symbols on the wall began to glow again. Jake shouted, "Now, Lear, do it now." The crystal sent a wave of energy across the room. The hunter froze. Its body flickered like a dying flame. But it was not done. It raised both arms and released a pulse of black smoke. The light from the crystal dimmed. The gate behind them started to flicker. Lear fell to his knees. Jake ran to him. "Hold on, we are so close." His mother crawled to the gate. She placed her hand on the control and whispered a word in her language. The machine roared back to life. The light returned brighter than before. The hunter screamed again and moved toward her. Jake stood between them, holding the rifle like a sword. The creature struck Jake, was thrown against the wall pane, shot through his chest. But he stood again, his legs shaking, his hands bleeding. He looked at Lear. "Finish it. I will hold it." Lear rose slowly, the crystal now floating above his hand, his eyes glowing brighter than ever before. He spoke in the tongue of stars, words older than time, words that commanded the gate to open. The gate responded. A golden circle appeared behind them, showing a sky filled with stars and light. A safe world waited on the other side. Jake turned to the hunter and charged. One last strike, one last stand. He grabbed the creature and pushed it back. The hunter fought, but Jake held on with everything he had. Lear shouted, "Jake, now come with us." Jake smiled. "Tell your mother she is free. Tell her she is safe now." Then he looked at the creature and whispered, "You do not win today." He pulled a small device from his jacket, an old grenade from another war. He pressed it and light filled the chamber. Hunter screamed one last time. Then silence. Lear and his mother stepped through the gate. The world behind them collapsed. The chamber broke into pieces and the gate closed forever on the other side. Lear fell to the ground crying. His mother held him close. The sky above them was blue. The grass was soft. They were free, but Jake was gone. His name would be written in the stars. A human who stood when others ran. A man who chose to protect instead of escape. Lear looked at the crystal, now dim but warm. In his hand inside, he could hear a voice, a memory, a friend. Jake's last words echoing in the wind. "You are not alone." Echoes among the stars. New World was quiet. The sky above them was soft blue with drifting clouds that moved like sails across a gentle ocean of air. Lear sat near a small hill with grass beneath him and wind brushing his face like a song without words. Beside him, his mother rested with her eyes closed, breathing slowly, her body healing with every moment. They had survived. They had escaped, but part of them was still back in that broken chamber, buried beneath red skies and fire. Part of them still held the echo of a man who gave everything. Jake looked at the crystal, now wrapped in cloth, resting in his hands. It no longer glowed, but it still felt warm like a heartbeat. Inside it he could feel something, a presence, a memory, a voice without sound that whispered, in moments of silence, "You are not alone." Held it tighter and closed his eyes. Weeks passed on the New World. Time moved differently here. The stars above them were not the ones Earth knew, but they felt safe. The planet was green and full of life. Old buildings stood broken, but silent. No machines watched from the skies. No hunters followed their steps. They built a small home near the hills using pieces from Lear's escape pod and materials from the land. His mother grew stronger each day. Her hands no longer shook. Her eyes, once filled with pain, now carried peace. But she never asked about Jake. She did not need to. She saw him in Lear's silence. She heard him and her son's voice one night as the moons rose above the trees. Lear heard a sound near the edge of the forest. He walked slowly with the crystal in hand, following the light. Breeze at the center of the clearing was a stone. It had not been there before. It was tall and smooth, with symbols carved into its surface. Lear touched it, and the symbols began to glow faintly. He stepped back as light rose from the ground. Not bright, not loud, just a shimmer like morning dew catching the sun. A figure appeared in the center. Not solid, not fully spirit. Jake stood there looking the same, wearing the same jacket, holding the same calm expression. Lear did not move, his heart beat faster. But he was not afraid. Jake smiled and looked around slowly. "So this is where you landed. Looks better than my old cabin." Lear spoke softly. "Is it really you?" Jake nodded. "In a way. This world holds energy older than time." When the gate closed and the chamber fell, it caught my final breath, my last thought, my will to protect. So now I remain here, not alive, not gone, just watching. Lear stepped closer. "I wish you had come with us." Jake looked at him. "I did. Part of me lives in that crystal, but more than that, part of me lives in you." He knelt down and placed his hand over Lear's. "You made me believe again, in something greater, in a purpose." Lear's eyes filled with tears, but he did not cry. He only nodded. Jake stood up slowly. "One day, others will come. Some will need help, some will bring harm. When that day comes, you must stand like we did. You must become what I was, a protector." The light began to fade. The image flickered. Lear whispered, "Will I see you again?" Jake smiled. "Every time you choose courage, every time you protect someone, I will be there." The light vanished. The stone became silent again. Lear stood in the clearing holding the crystal, but his hands no longer trembled. Years passed on the quiet world. Lear grew taller, wiser. He built more homes, found others who had escaped through forgotten gates. They came from different stars, but shared the same scars. He led them, not as a ruler but as a guide. He told stories of Earth, of a man named Jake, of a gate made of fire and courage. The crystal was placed at the center of their new village, not as a weapon, but as a symbol, a reminder. One day, a child asked him, "Was Jake real, or just a tale?" He smiled and placed his hand over the child's heart. "He was more real than anything I have ever known." At night he still looked at the stars, not to escape, but to listen, and sometimes in the quiet between breaths, he still heard the whisper, "You are not alone."